Dear students, I welcome you in the online classes organized by ISP, and the subject that we are learning together is research methodology. We know that MPhil is a research-based degree, and at the end of 2 semesters, you are going into the arena of research. You have to choose the topic and you have to select your area of interest, and you will go into the process of writing a thesis. So for that purpose, this component of course is very important as it will guide you through that process of research. So, dear students, we started with the definition of research. Then we concluded that a researcher is basically very organized kind of person. He or she is a good planner, and accordingly he or she organizes his research very well. He or she always keeps an eye on the resources of the research. Then the timing and cost of the research is very important for him or her. So we moved forward and we have been discussing the methods of research for now number of weeks, and one of the important questions that should be in your mind, and some of your class fellows have asked for me, that what are the specific methodologies that can be used in the field of literature and linguistics? Because basically all of us are the students of literature and language. So naturally all of us are interested into those methodologies which can be used in the research in the field of language and literature. Dear students, last time we discussed some methodologies which are specific for research in the field of literature, and I told you even in that lecture that this list is not exhaustive, and whatever we have discussed, that is not the end of the world, but we know that there are so many other methodologies, and in the recent years there have been an effort to mix up different methodologies in order to research in the field of literature and language. Dear students, today we are going to discuss linguistics research tools, because in the previous lecture we have been discussing the methodologies that is specific in the field of research for literature, and at the end of last lecture I had told you that we will be going to discuss some methodologies which are specific in the field of language or linguistics. Today we are going to discuss linguistics research tools. After discussing these tools, we would be able to point out what are the research methodologies in which these research tools can be used. So those research methodologies would be specific for research in the field of language. Let us have a look at the contents of today's lecture. We are going to discuss linguistics research tools, and there are three tools which are very important for research in the field of language. These tools are questionnaire, the interview, and a test. So, the researcher, in order to use these tools, has to develop these tools first, because every researcher has to look what is the nature of his or her research. So, if he or she is in the field of language and he or she wants to contribute in the field of research, then he has to be familiar with at least these three tools. But I want to make it clear that these three tools are not the only tools for research in the field of language. There could be many other tools that the people have been using in the recent years. However, these are the three basic tools that are mainly used in the field of research of language. Questionnaire, secondly, interview, and thirdly, a test. So we have to develop a questionnaire, but when we develop questionnaires, then there are deficiencies and shortcomings and defects in those questionnaires. So we are going to point out those deficiencies, so that if we have to develop such a kind of questionnaire, at least we should keep in mind these deficiencies and avoid these deficiencies when we develop a questionnaire for our research. Then there is same pattern of developing an interview for our research, and in recent years, interview is a technique and it is a kind of tool that is very common in and it is in use for research in language. Then there are different types of interviews as well, and at the end we would see if we have to develop a test for research in the field of language, what should be the qualities and what should be the issues that we should keep in mind while developing a test. And dear students, at the end I would like to set an exercise for you as usual. Now let us move forward. Now, survey research we have gone through this method, and we are very familiar with this method now, as perhaps in the previous lecture we have covered some of the methodologies, and one of these methodologies was survey research. So survey research is an umbrella type of research method under which we can conduct many types of researches related to linguistics. So we are heading towards actually towards those methods which are very specific for research in the field of linguistics. So survey research is an umbrella type of research, and many other types of researches can be done and can be conducted under this umbrella type of research. The tools used in these researches are, we have already mentioned these tools: questionnaires, interviews, observations, tests, etc. These tools are being developed by the researchers very carefully. We have to be very careful if we are going to use these tools for our research, because the conclusion of our research now depends upon these tools, and if we would be able to develop these tools according to the nature of our study, then naturally our research would be valid and would be valued. But unfortunately, if we would not be able to develop these tools according to the nature of our study, then we have to face many problems. So we have to develop these tools very carefully. The development of these tools depends upon the nature of the research. So as we are mentioning that we have to look at the nature of our research in the field of language, and then we have to decide whether we are going to use a questionnaire for this purpose, or we are going to conduct interviews or observations plus one of these tools, or the tests, or some other kind of tool that we have to use in our research. So this is a very important decision that the researcher has to take at the very outset and at the start of the research, that what kind of tool he or she is going to develop. Now, if we look at the first tool, that is questionnaire, these may be of two types: closed-ended questionnaire, open-ended questionnaire. Now, closed-ended questionnaire is a kind of questionnaire in which the answers are predetermined. So, these are such kind of questionnaires in which you already set the answers for the respondent, from whom you are going to take the response of these questions. You set some 2, 3, 4 answers for each question, and the respondent has to select one of the answers. So that is why we are saying that here the answers are predetermined. Example: which of the following newspapers do you read at least once a week? And then we give a list of these newspapers. For example, the Dawn, the News, the Nation. So these are the three options that we have predetermined for the respondent, and our respondent has to pick one of these newspapers, one of the name of these newspapers. So such kind of questionnaire is known as closed-ended questionnaire, in which answers are predetermined. The answer would naturally come out from one of the newspaper that you have already suggested. So these are closed-ended questionnaires. Now, closed-ended questions are easy to analyze, and the person answering these questions is comfortable. So our respondent is comfortable in answering such kind of questions because he or she has not to think for a time to write or to give the answers of those questions, as the options are already before him or her. So, and similarly, analysis of such kind of questions is very easy. For example, we have distributed 100 questionnaires, and there are out of these 100, 75 have been returned, and then we can calculate how many people have decided or have given us the response that he or she is reading the Dawn or the News or the Nation. So these can be calculated, and similarly the answers of other questions can be calculated, and then we use some statistical tools in order to decide according to the nature of our study. So that is why analysis of such kind of questionnaire, that is closed-ended questionnaires, is very easy. Commonly, the researchers prefer closed-ended questionnaires. That is why, because analysis is easy in this field. Low cost in money and time. Naturally, you will distribute these questionnaires in some number of persons, and it will be low cost. You have to just get the copies of these questionnaires, and you have to distribute these questionnaires. So you save your time as well as money. Easy to get information from a lot of people quickly. Very quick method of getting information. You do not have to wait for months and years. Sometimes the researchers wait for months and years in order to get information. Now, on the other side are open-ended questionnaires. It is a kind of questionnaire in which the respondent has to think and write his or her answer. So here the options are not available to the respondent. He or she has to think, and then he or she would write his or her answer. Example: which newspaper do you read at least once in a week? Here the options are not available. So the person has to think which newspaper he or she reads once a week, at least once in a week. Open-ended questions are difficult to analyze and they're troublesome to answer. Sometimes the respondent feels uncomfortable to answer such questions. Similarly, as the analysis is not well directed, so it is possible that one of the person may say that he or she does not even read newspaper. It is a possibility. Then one of the person may say that he or she reads only Urdu newspaper, and you are researching for the readership of the English newspaper. It is based upon opinions, feelings, and judgments. That is why these are difficult to analyze, because how can you analyze the feelings of other people? How can you analyze the judgments of the other people? That would become a very problematic kind of research, because these are the things that are difficult to analyze. Now, what could be the shortcomings of such questionnaires? Problems of data quality and accuracy, as we have been mentioning side by side. There could be many problems. For example, the quality of data may be one of problem, and as well as accuracy of data, because there are so many people who would not be serious in answering your questionnaires, and that would create a problem for the researcher. Similarly, you cannot judge how many people are giving answer honestly and sincerely. Then low response rate is another problem, because if you are distributing 100, for example, 100 of questionnaires among different people, now how many people are going to return those questionnaires? That cannot be answered at the time of distribution. And sometimes we find that people are non-serious and they are not going to return those questionnaires. So the rate of return of these questionnaires is very low. Problems of motivating respondents. You have to motivate each and every person that he or she should answer these questions. Then misunderstandings cannot be corrected. Sometimes the people misunderstand your object of research, and you cannot go to each and every individual to correct those misunderstandings. Similarly, there might be so many people who would fill your questionnaire wrongly. That would be another problem for you. Respondent literacy problem. Perhaps there would be so many people who are not as literate as you have supposed. So there would be problems for you. The lack of control over order and context of answer, because the person who is distributing the questionnaires, the researcher, has no control over the order, organization that the people are going to, how the people are going to respond. Similarly, the context of answers cannot be controlled. Impossible to check seriousness and honesty of answers. We have already discussed it, that most of the people are non-serious in answering your questions, and that creates a mighty problem for the researcher. Similarly, honesty of the respondents is also sometimes doubtful. Now, the second tool that normally we use in such kind of research is the tool of interview. The interviews used in research are semi-structured. So sometimes as the questions are of two types, close-ended questions and open-ended questions. Similarly, mostly the interviews are semi-structured, means that some of the questions are predetermined, and similarly you try to get answers from your interviewee which are predetermined, and you give choices to those people to answer your questions. These interviews are just like relaxed conversation on the topic of mutual interest. So this is the mode of taking interview. These are not very formal kind of interviews, but just you discuss a topic of mutual interest, and you get the information from the respondent. The researcher asks questions and follows up on the answers of the interviewee, the person from whom you are taking interview. So the researcher will first ask questions, and on the basis of those answers he would follow up, and in this way he or she would gather data. The researchers try to extract as much knowledge information as possible from the interviewee, who is expert in the field. So naturally the person from whom we try to get interview, who is our interviewee, is an expert person in that field, and we try to extract maximum knowledge and information from that person. It is ideally a free-flowing conversation. So an ideal of taking interview, that there should be free kind of discussion and conversation between two persons. The researcher tries to keep the conversation on the topic, because he or she has to save the time, and he or she has to get information about certain specific topic. So he tries to keep the conversation on track. The length of interview varies. Sometimes you just take the interview of half an hour, that might be enough. Sometimes you have to interview and re-interview, so that will increase the length of the interview. If done competently, it is an effective method of gathering data. So researcher should be a very experienced person if he or she is going to use this tool. A versatile method that can be used to collect data in limitless range of topics and research questions. But this is versatile method. I have already mentioned that in recent years this is very much the fashion to gather data through interview. And if you are expert in this field of taking and conducting interview, and you can conduct interview on a specific topic, then you can use this method for a range of topics, this tool for the range of topics, and you can collect answers for the range of research questions. Now, what are different types of approaches to interview? Number one is the structured interview. It has set questions, and the researcher sticks to the set of questions and their order. So the questions are all already set. A list of questions is already there with the researcher, and he or she sticks to that set of questions and their arrangement. The questions in this kind of interview are closed-ended. The interviewee is offered a large number of predetermined answers. So in structured interviews, that is the name of this type of interview, the answers are also provided to the respondent or from the person whom you are taking interview, and he or she has to select one of the answer. It is just like closed-ended question. Then Semi-structured interview. The interviewer has topics that they want to cover, but there is space for digression. So there is a limited space for digression, and you can move away from the topic. But naturally, the interviewer or the researcher tries to keep everything on topic. The style of interview is conversational. Again, it is a kind of mutual conversation between the person. Then the number 3 is unstructured interviews. There are no predetermined answers, and interviewee is encouraged to speak openly. So this is a kind of open discussion on certain topic, and you encourage your respondent to speak openly, detailed and explanation. So this kind of interview is a detailed one, and the respondent, from the person from whom you are taking this interview, explains so many things. Observations and questions arise in context. So in this kind of interview, the researcher does not have a set of questions, but he or she would generate questions according to the context of that interview at the spot. Similarly, he or she would take observations during this interview. There are some other types of interviews as well. For example, narrative interviews is one of the type of interview, and then life history interviews, in which a person is encouraged to describe his or her life story. Now, the third tool that normally we use in the field of linguistics is a test. For example, you want to judge the ability of a class. For example, you are trying to judge the ability of some class at matric level. So how would you test that ability? And how you would, because we know that measurement is very basic in research. You have to measure the things. So for that purpose, you will have to develop a test. You will take a test. For example, you try to measure the ability in grammar, in English grammar. Then what would you do? You would develop a test. You will give that test to the class, and the class would be taking that test, and after that, for a certain period of time, you will teach them grammar, and you will again give them such kind of test at the end of that period, and from the comparison of these two tests, scores in these two tests, you will measure the ability of that class. So these tests are developed to check the achievements, ability, or skills of persons or groups. Now again, here are certain types of tests. Normally we develop two kinds of tests. Selected response test. In these tests, multiple choice answers are set. So you ask questions and you set some choices before the people whom you are going to test, and they will have to pick or choose one of those answers. That is selected response test. And constructed response test. In these tests, short answer essays are set for the examiner. So here you require, how would you test the ability or skill or achievement? You will, the examinee is required to write short answers of certain questions, or he or she would have to write short essays, and these type of tests are called constructed response tests. What should be the features of these tests? Overall plan. You will have to make an overall plan for conducting such kind of test, and you will have to go into the detail. How would you how would you conduct this kind of test. Then content definition. You have to define. For example, we were taking the example of we want to test the level of grammar of a certain class, and then we teach them grammar for 2 months, 3 months, and again we set a test for them in order to measure their ability, whether they have improved in that field or not. So we have to, before developing this test, we have to define the content, what we are going to set in that test. Then test specification, whether it is about grammar, we want, as we are taking the example of grammar, or something else. For example, whether we want to test whether the teachers are capable enough, how they are, what is their method of teaching. Are they teaching through direct method or grammar translation method? What kind of method they are adopting? That would be tested through these tests. Then item development. What kind of item you are going to test? You have to define it at the very outset. Then what would be the design of the test? Whether it would be such kind of test in which you are going to set multiple choice questions, or it is you are going to test them through short questions, or you are going to test them by writing the essays. Then test, after test design, test production. How you are required to decide at the very outset that how they would produce this test. Then how you are going to administer this test, at what would be the timing that should be settled. Scoring test responses. After checking these tests, naturally you have to report their results. Then you will set the passing scores out of 100. For example, what would be the score that would be considered pass. Then you will report these scores to some authority, or if you are a researcher, you will naturally analyze these scores, and on the basis of these scores you would declare a result or make a conclusion of your study. So these are the points that a researcher should keep in mind while developing a test. Now, dear students, we have studied the tools that are normally used for research in the field of linguistics, and why I have set these tools before methods. If you will be well aware about these tools, then naturally it would be easier for us to discuss the methods that are being used in the field of language for research. So hopefully in our next lecture we are going to discuss these methods which are very specific to research in language. And at the end I am going to set an exercise for you, and the exercise for today is write a detailed note on the different tools used in the research in linguistics. That's all from my side for today. Stay safe, stay blessed.